All right, we are live with our second webinar, SEO Leadership for 2024. And on today's episode, we have Peter Mindenhall. Thank you so much for joining us, Pete. How are you doing today?
I'm not so bad, thank you. Good to be on. Great to see you.
Awesome. And Pete, if you could just give us a little bit of a quick introduction on who you are and a little brief background on what you do, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, sure. I'm essentially the lead SEO for a private company that's got a lot, several portfolios of sites, some of which are quite large. The main one I manage is a travel portfolio. It's about 500 sites covering 12 languages and pretty much most countries on the planet. And yeah, my job is to manage day-to-day staff, get content done, manage the sites themselves, make sure everything is in order, and also liaise with the developer, make sure best practice is going on, and just basically to grow the business. So yeah, I have to report upwards and downwards in the bigger chain of things, I guess. And been around, been doing it for a good few years now.
Awesome.
Brilliant. Hey, I know the travel industry is sort of booming at the minute. How long have you been sort of working within that niche? And was it over COVID? Were you have any experience over COVID?
Yeah, I first came into this particular portfolio around about 2017, and so yeah, plenty of time before COVID. We saw a lot of exciting times and increasing growth in travel then as well, pre-COVID, and with COVID coming along, yeah, that was tough. When you're dealing with travel, pretty much everything shut down.
Yeah. How did you guys sort of adapt your strategy over that sort of year or two?
It was largely a case of having to kind of like muscle it out, I suppose. I mean, just ride through it. There's nothing you could do. Obviously, adding restriction rules and things like that in travel locations was helpful. But the problem was also at the same time is that the governments would keep changing policies and rules and regulations. So you could publish one thing 1 minute and it'd be out of date 10 minutes later. So it's very much a case of, okay, keep an eye on what's going on. Take note of what was being progressively effective for much, much longer. Some parts of the world were shut down for far longer than others. And yeah, basically just juggling resources around to cope with that constant shift of where demand was going to be and where opportunities were going to surface. So yeah, glad it's over. We seem to be past. In most cases, seem to be beyond COVID numbers now. Not everywhere.
Perfect. And were you ready for the big sort of influx when sort of everything was lifted? Did you expect that sort of uptake?
Yeah, I think there was an element of to be expected about it. There was obviously all the press were talking about pent-up demand and things like that. People hadn't spent money going on holiday the previous year, so there was a lot of additional money around, I guess, and that was reflected. But having said that, a lot of prices were also significantly higher. So as much as yes, there was more business and yes, there was more money, the actual revenue coming out of it for affiliates and suppliers was not quite as high as you might think. They were too busy trying to recoup losses from the previous year. But yeah, pricing seems to be settling down a bit now, which is good.
Awesome. Just coming out of lockdown and moving into sort of the era of AI now, as an SEO lead, do you have how did you manage those aspects of adaptability, especially within your team and helping clients? I guess maybe were there any takeaways from what you learned in lockdown to also applying it through adapting throughout the AI sort of revolution that we're going through right now?
Yeah, I think in the context there, I think both are quite separate things. I mean, for COVID, it was a case of we've just got to ride this out. There's literally not a great deal. Didn't matter what kind of content you put out, you're not going to magically increase or make the ability to travel possible. So it really was a case of just batten down the hatches and crack on through it and try and get as much done in advance of travel returning to normal. That was the other thing that we did know that would happen, is that eventually travel would return. With respect to AI, there's a very different pivot going on there. AI is still relatively new. It's still in its infancy. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. It's kind of, yes, there are some awesome things you can do with AI, but also it's not it's not without its flaws. I'm finding that we're having to change certain people's roles to some extent, where they're no longer writers necessarily, but they're very much more becoming editors and fact checkers. Researching and fact checking very, very similar, of course, but the moving from writing to editing, it's a different type of work to do. It's a different amount of time to do it and things like that. And just taking the responsibility for it. Some writers don't like editing. It's one of those things. Coping with that and dealing with it. It's one of those things. We have to move on. We've kept all the staff on throughout the change, and some are really embracing it very well. Some not so much, but it is what it is. You don't get into SEO if you think the world is going to stay the same for the rest of your life. This is an ever-changing.
Yeah, definitely. Change is the only constant. Did you ever feel any pressure during that time from client side during that AI sort of changes in the...
Well, because I work for a single entity, I'm not an agency SEO as such. We've got a lot of sites in the same portfolio. Sure, my boss is very excited about AI, as is the developer and the development team as well. It's as many SEOs I'm sure can probably relate to. Sometimes we come across as the agents of doom, saying, "Oh, you can't do that," or "That's not a good idea." And it's not that we're negative about it. It's just kind of like, we're well aware that we're the people that are going to have to clean it up when something gets really spammy or over the top, because you can with such an heavily automated process. Just because you can, it doesn't mean you should. Very much applies. And it's finding that balance. That's tough to do when you've got peers that are very excited about a particular type of technology, and they just want to run with it and watch the world burn, as it were. But finding that balance, that's part of it. Balance is a key thing. If you can find it, life's a lot happier.
Definitely. And you touched on it previously with over COVID, everybody had to share resources, and then the writers having to become editors and stuff like that. As sort of a senior SEO and an SEO lead, how important is it to be able to delegate roles and tasks effectively?
It's essential. If you don't keep on top of that, you end up pulling a lot of work back on your own plate. Certainly in my case anyway. I have staff. At the beginning, we had very few staff. We had just 1 or 2 staff, and as time has gone on and as we've scaled the portfolio and got bigger and bigger, I'm having to delegate out and hire staff to take care of the things that I've managed to package up into a series of procedures and instructions. So being able to, as the industry changes, and before long we're going to have quantum computing as well. That's going to open up another whole can of worms. But with things like AI, you have to be able to maneuver your staff into different positions or different roles and different responsibilities. Otherwise, you're just you're going to go the way of the arc. So change is going to happen, and you have to change with it. You can't sit around and do the same old thing and expect the same results.
Exactly. And do you have any sort of tools or processes that sort of helps you do that?
I have a fantastic developer. With respect to I suppose refocusing staff and things like that, it's a tough one. As a general rule of thumb, if you're going to need to change how staff work and what they do, it's always good to have some idea of what interests them, what makes them tick, what floats their boat, what do they get enjoyment from. Because sometimes, we'll have something design-wise come up, and I'll say to all of the members in the team who don't have a dedicated designer, who's got some interest in design work, who's got experience in doing it, are you good, do you enjoy it? And it's not always the case of, the greatest one the greatest one at doing it wants to do it. And sometimes, you get the opportunity to someone that wants to develop other skills as well as what they're already doing. So, yeah, and communication, really. It's talk to your staff, understand your staff, listen to your staff, ask some questions. How can give you feedback. That's really where it is for me.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Mine is sort of a two-part question, and maybe transitions nicely from listening to the staff as well. When do you determine that there's the right time to hire for you, maybe to build your team? And the second part of that question is, managing a remote team, how important is the onboarding process for you? And do you have certain things that you include in your onboarding process to help get your new teammates started?
Okay. So, sorry, could you repeat the first part of the question again?
When do you identify that there's the right time to hire?
Usually when we reach a point that work is getting on top of us, backlog largely, or a skill set is required that we don't necessarily have already. Sometimes that happens. We'll need someone new to do something that we just don't have enough experience upon. Invariably, each of us has our own explicit sets of skills, if you like, and sort of take on new skills as when we have time or the want to, and the company needs it. Other times we've got to go out and find someone. With respect to managing a team remotely and onboarding, I've only ever really managed from a remote situation. I have done a little bit of management in an office, but in an office environment, but that's quite some years ago now.
Okay.
But remotely, communication is key. From a management point of view, it should be Slack, email, and sometimes phone calls or video calls. But Slack and email are usually the primary. If it's a particularly big project or campaign that involves a lot of staff and a lot of processes over time, then we might use something like Trello or similar, a ticketing system as well. But that tends to be few and far between. And Google Sheets. Google Sheets is not, it's a lifesaver. I'd still rather use Excel, but Google Sheets for tracking things, is a godsend. It's and always, when onboarding staff, something that I always find is whenever I work with anyone, is ensuring that they understand that I am there to be asked questions of. If you're not sure about something, even if it's something really silly, ask me. I'd rather have a little bit of a giggle about it and we move on because it was a silly question than you keep on doing something that is, creating 1,000 erroneous duplicate pages in the background. It's operating procedures. I basically do everything in the company at least once, probably 2 or 3 times, so I can video it, so I can show people exactly what happens, what's expected to happen, and what they are expected to do. And if you're seeing something that doesn't happen in that video, take a screenshot, tell me what you were doing, let me know. So it's operating procedures, showing somebody how something's done, and educating them on how to report something that isn't working. Because there's nothing worse than a member of staff goes, "Oh yeah, but it's just not working." But that's not helpful. What were you doing? When? It's. I find that I get asked less and less questions, but again, the day-to-day management is keeping in touch and understanding what the staff are up to, what they enjoy doing.
Awesome. And how do you? I imagine that you're surrounded by a team of A players now, especially working remotely as well. How do you identify A players that you would say you'd like to work with, or maybe within your team already?
I think a lot of the time you could, when you speak to staff, you should be able to hear that enthusiasm. If they're one of those guys that really wants to go somewhere, that wants to learn, you should be able to hear that. And sometimes there's a huge amount of naivety that goes with that, which could sometimes help point that out. Naivety is a fantastic thing, because we like to hire staff that have a background in the skill that they're doing. So they might be a writer, for example, but I'm not I'd rather hire a writer that has no experience or understanding of SEO at all, because I don't want them to come in with preconceived ideas or ideas that they've read on a friend of a friend of a friend's blog, that that kind of stuff. And yeah, invariably, if there's the making of an A player is usually they're very inquisitive. They ask questions. They want to know more than what you're laying out. If you're laying out a minimum to be able to do the job, they're asking more about it, or why do we do this, and things like that. So yeah, it's a lot of the time, if people want to go somewhere with a career in it, they'll ask about it. But yeah, again, ask staff, where do you think you're going to be in 4 or 5 years' time? What do you want to do? How do you think you could, if I gave you the reins as to what we do next, what would you choose? And the answers that you'll get will be the extremes in some cases, but the answers that you get will tell you, who's capability of being an there, definitely.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I love that.
And Pete, talking about sort of people coming up and sort of junior level SEOs, is there any sort of advice that you would give to people who are at that level to add to their skill set to become SEO lead, SEO manager level?
Talk to other SEOs, follow other SEOs on the socials. I'm fairly active on Twitter. I'm not necessarily agreed with by many people, but I'm fairly active in the industry on Twitter. And I've learned by asking other people in the industry questions, reading what they've done, and then also in some cases, or in a lot of cases, critically questioning what they've written. And try and think about it from a Google, from a search engine point of view. It's all very. You see so many theories and concepts come about through the forums and legitimate and otherwise. But then when you actually look back at it and go, well, is that realistically A, possible, and B, is it gameable? Ask questions like that. Question everything. And yeah, talk to peers. Try and communicate with them. It's a great way to, step away from the industry sometimes as well. Sometimes we get a bit frustrated with something not working as well as it should do, or what have you. Talk to others, and also look at those that not necessarily have been successful from a financial point of view, but look at those people who made a difference to the web in the old days. The likes of read up on some of Matt Cutts' old stuff. Eric Ward, for example, one of the link builders of the very early days. Eric passed a long time ago, but his content and his methods and his approach are still valid today. And yeah, understand data, understand reporting. Yeah, keep on top of things, keep reading, and keep talking to people. That's what I was there.
No, definitely excellent. And going back just a touch to where you're talking about sort of your operations day to day with a remote team. How do you sort of make sure that everybody's communicating effectively, so that you're all sort of pushing towards that same goal?
A lot. We track a lot of the tasks and work that we do on Google Sheets, as I mentioned, and a lot of the time it's just a column to put a yes or a no in at the end of it as to what's going on. So I have maybe a dozen different sheets or books or what have you with various reports on there. It's not timekeeping to the same kind of extent as you can see in some companies, but it's kind of like how much have you got done today? Is it done? Are we nearly there? Yeah, it's very simple stuff. It's checkbox stuff. And yeah, we'll have a call. I usually do one-on-ones once a month, and we might have a group call every couple of weeks. To see how everybody's getting on, see if there's any breakdowns in communication, and see what get feedback on anything that could be improved or further automated to reduce the workload and improve throughput.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Just on the theme of communication, within a few of our webinars, it's been highlighted a lot that advice to maybe like junior SEOs that working on communication skills was vitally important, especially if you're going into meetings throughout your career progression. Do you have any tips to junior SEOs or SEOs that are climbing up their career to help them maybe communicate their goals more effectively to clients or C-suites or higher ups?
I think initially start with learning how to communicate with developers. If you can communicate with a developer, there's a very good chance you can communicate with everybody else. Developers, it's a bit of an art, dealing with developers. But I've found, I worked in sales for many years before becoming an SEO, so I'm used to dealing with sales managers and C-suite and stuff like that. I found that relatively easy to do. But developers, they're invariably very clever. They invariably have their set of ways and their set of rules and their set of instructions. And SEO doesn't always fit into what they're necessarily given from a development environment. So, learning to be tactful is a great one, and getting your point across. But also, if you're going to present ideas and ways in which the company can move forward, or a department can move forward, bring the whys with you and the how. It's all very well, anybody can have a good idea, but unless you can express how you're going to get there in as relatively as few words as possible, you're going to have a tough time. Try and be succinct, try and be to the point, try and show it in a shiny graph, but not a pie chart. And you should be good. It's simple, straightforward, to the point. And again, be prepared for questions to come back at you, and be prepared to say, "I'm not sure. I'll find out." Don't try and blag your way through it. We can see it. If you're not sure, a lot more respect for somebody who says, "I don't know. I'm going to find out." It's about being able to succinctly express what you're trying to get across. And simply, if you do that with as fewer words as possible, the better, the easier it'll be.
Awesome.
And working remotely, Pete, is there anything that you do or the company does to instill like a strong culture, or is it more just everybody crack on with the tasks?
The staff I have are in various different time zones. We're all on different time zones, actually. So it is very much a case of, we have this amount of work to do. We pay you for this amount of hours. I don't care when you do it; just get it done. There are some situations where obviously we have to work in sync, as it were. Certainly with the developer, I have to do it. I work on the same as the developer pretty much. So that all has to happen at the same time. But it's daily emails, just quick notes of what's gone on. Handling it generally, something I've learned over the years: learn to meditate, take some time away from the screen, take some time away from just business. Even if it's in the middle of the day, 10 or 15 minutes, it's fine. Take time out, get away from the screen, try and empty your head for a bit and come back. That makes life a lot easier. And I also, with everybody, it's fine to make mistakes. They're going to happen. Don't worry about it. There's not going to be any shouting and screaming. It's a case of fix it first, and then we'll pull it apart and find out why it happened later. We don't get too many mistakes, thankfully, but they happen. They're part of business, and there's nothing worse than management that just go mental because someone's felt something wrong.
Definitely. And apart from Slack, are there any other sort of tools that you guys use to make sure that everybody is pulling their weight on the projects, or making sure that they're sort of meeting the timeline?
We're all pretty disciplined, to be honest. Everybody gets along. Slack. We've had slackers in the past, and they just don't. They don't stick around. It's invariably, if someone's not pulling their weight, they don't really want to be there. And in which case, it's kind of like, don't waste my time or yours. If this isn't for you, say so. Let's move on and part amicably, and we'll find someone else. Fine. You know, there's a lot of people out there that want to do the kind of work that we do, and yeah, I'm happy to spend a bit of time finding them if I need to.
Brilliant. And touching on that, is there anything that you would recommend, whether it be sort of an SEO executive level or SEO manager level, to sort of incorporate into their first 90 days when joining a new team?
I think for everybody, understand standard operating procedures. And if the company doesn't have any, ask for them or offer to produce them. It's something I spend an enormous amount of my time producing operating procedures, and they make my life a lot easier. So, if you walk into a company that don't have any, there's an opportunity there for you to really kind of like show yourself in what can be done, and also understand what's expected of you, but also if you're coming in at a management level, what's expected of those below you, and also what is going to be expected from those above you. What are you going to need to report on? How are you going to report on it? Is what they're asking you to report on realistic? And goals and KPIs, of course, come into it. Understand those goals. Increase impressions by 11 million% by the end of the week is not a goal or a KPI. It's assess them. Are they realistic? And if they're not, it's already worked very well. A lot of companies have crazy, vanity metrics and things like that to meet. But if they're not, and you're new to the team, you're new to the company, and you're new into the industry, come up with a solution. Suggest what is a good idea and how you would go about it. There's a lot of opportunity in very large companies out there where SEO is a lot of jargon and all the rest of it. There's not much real sense going on. And if you have a bit of common sense, use it. Bring it to the table. Someone in the company will recognise it sooner or later, and you'll be able to move your way up the chain.
Definitely.
Yeah, great points there. This one's sort of maybe a little bit more of a challenging question, but as a team lead, were there any bottlenecks that you struggled with in the past year? And how did you identify the problem and maybe resolve it or work towards resolving it?
Say in recent years, we've not had much in the way of bottlenecks go on. We are a very smooth running operation. Invariably, I mean, the pivoting to AI has caused a little bit of a bottleneck, and insofar as people having to shift their mindset as to what they're doing day to day. I would suggest probably the most serious case of a bottleneck I've ever experienced was quite some years ago now. This is back in the early days of Panda and Penguin, the first iterations of that. I was working on a very large site that got a link penalty, and of course, massive panic at the time. And most of the marketing department and a couple of devs were repurposed, shall we say, to literally deal with addressing that. The backlog of work that created insofar as producing content and publishing news and blog articles and just importing more data that was in the real estate industry, importing more listings and things like that was huge. And of course, the hit that we were taking traffic-wise, it meant that there was a lot of money just not coming in the door. So we had to move very, very quickly. And that, again, was just, okay, focus on finding the solution, get the solution into a single-page doc, and flash it out. Which bits do we need to do first? Which are the most important? Get it done and get it over the line. Hopefully never need to see something like that again. But yeah, I think it's bottlenecking. If you walk into a big company that's in a bit of a state, that could be a tough one. And I must admit, I don't have huge experience of that. What I have learned is that if I've got really high quality operating procedures, videos on how to do stuff, and I onboard the staff well, it avoids a lot of the bottlenecks that would otherwise appear. And also encourage staff to feedback on how something can be done better, more quickly, more easily. And again, they'll come back with crazy ideas that are not possible. That's fine, but always encourage it, because one day they'll come across something that we haven't thought of that. And again, it makes the company run more smoothly, life a lot easier, and we get more work done in less time.
Definitely.
Brilliant.
I love that most of your answers. I think one of the big things that was highlighted for me was just put the team first, ask the team what's going on, check in with them and communicate. So that's a very awesome takeaway from this webinar that we've done. And time flew. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, been my pleasure.
Definitely. And we can find you on Twitter. That's where you're most active, right? Yeah. Awesome.
Really, yeah.
All right, we'll shout you out on Twitter. And thank you so much for joining us. It was very interesting and insightful. Had a lot of great answers. And enjoy the weekend.
Thanks, Pete.
Likewise. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.